Have you ever imagined living in a city where gardens floated in the air, suspended, as if dancing between heaven and earth? Have you ever dreamed of dwelling in a metropolis where the color purple was more valuable than gold, or walking on a wall so wide that 10 chariots could ride side by side? The cities mentioned in the Bible are not simply forgotten names in an ancient manuscript. They were true marvels of engineering and centers of power so impressive that even today they continue to leave archaeologists breathless. If you think you already know these cities, get ready to be amazed. We are about to reveal secrets that scholars took centuries to uncover. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any discoveries about these extraordinary places that helped shape the course of history. The most imposing cities of the Bible, which even experts consider astonishing. Jericho, the oldest city in the world, and the setting for one of the most mysterious events in history, the collapse of its mighty walls. Imagine living in a city that already existed when much of humanity still lived in caves. That was Jericho, considered the oldest continuously inhabited city on Earth. Archaeologists are amazed to discover layer upon layer of civilizations dating back an astonishing 9,000 years before Christ. While many communities still lived nomadic lives, Jericho already had well-built homes, planned streets, and even a sophisticated defense system. But what truly baffles historians to this day is the famous collapse of its walls. Have you ever stopped to wonder how it was possible that a simple group of people, marching and blowing trumpets, could bring down such strong walls? For decades, archaeologists viewed this story with skepticism. However, recent discoveries have changed that perspective. It has been revealed that Jericho lies directly atop a seismic fault. And, most surprising of all, is that the archaeological evidence supports that the walls did indeed collapse outward, just as the biblical account describes. What many don't know is that Jericho was a true oasis in the desert. Its strategic location near the Jordan River and important trade routes made it a real gateway to the Promised Land. In addition, Jericho was nourished by a freshwater spring so abundant that it was known as the City of Palms. Imagine a sea of green vegetation in the arid Judean desert, an almost surreal scene. Continuing our journey, we arrive at Hebron, a city that holds beneath its surface some of the most sacred chapters of biblical history. Did you know that the tomb of the patriarchs is located there? It is the place where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob rest alongside their wives, as if a true spiritual treasure were buried underground. Archaeologists are stunned by what they find in Hebron, especially when encountering Herod's colossal wall, a monumental structure built with meticulously carved stones, some weighing over 8 tons, fitted together so precisely that not even a sword blade can slip between them. The technique used was so advanced that even today, modern engineers question how such a structure could have been built without heavy machinery. But perhaps the most fascinating fact about Hebron is this: it was the first capital of King David. Before conquering Jerusalem, David ruled Israel for 7.5 years from this very city. Imagine the streets where Abraham and Sarah once walked, later becoming the home of the most illustrious monarch of Israel. Archaeological excavations show that Hebron was, since ancient times, a thriving agricultural and commercial hub, especially renowned for its sweet grapes and other fruits that supplied the entire region. The city's significance is so profound that even today it is considered sacred by 3 major religions. And there's a powerful spiritual reason for that. It was in Hebron that Abraham purchased the cave of Machpelah, the first piece of land legally bought in the Promised Land, for the purpose of burying his wife Sarah. That act was not just a gesture of mourning, but a powerful symbol of the beginning of the fulfillment of God's promise, that his descendants would inherit that land forever. When we turn our gaze to Susa, we are transported to the splendor of the Persian Empire. This city, the setting of Queen Esther's story, was so opulent that its palaces were adorned with marble and gold columns, and its floors gleamed like mosaics made of precious stones. The ruins reveal that Susa's royal palace was so immense that it exceeded the size of 10 modern football fields. A true architectural colossus that reflected the grandeur of that empire. But what truly fascinates historians is that Susa, one of the capitals of the most powerful empire of its time, became the setting of one of the most dramatic turns in the entire Bible. It was there that Esther, a young Jewish orphan, became queen and, with courage and wisdom, saved her people from the extermination planned by the wicked Haman. Imagine, in a time when women barely had a voice, a young woman changed the fate of an entire nation. What few know is that it was also from Susa that Nehemiah departed, with the blessing of King Artaxerxes, to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Archaeologists have discovered that the city had a highly advanced administrative system, with royal archives housing thousands of clay tablets. These recorded everything, from trade transactions to imperial decrees, just as mentioned in the book of Esther, when the sleepless king ordered the royal records to be read to him. Founded around 4000 BC, Susa is one of the oldest cities in human history. Its strategic location between Mesopotamia and the Iranian plateau made it a vibrant crossroads where cultures, languages, and traditions converged. It was in this multicultural environment that the exiled Jews managed to keep their identity and faith alive, even under foreign rule. And if the cities we've explored so far have already impressed you, get ready, because those that follow raise the level of greatness, mystery, and wonder even more. Let's begin with Tyre, the fortified island that guarded the most valuable secret of the ancient world. What would you think if I told you that there once was an almost invincible city, partially built on the sea? That's right, Tyre, the powerful Phoenician metropolis that still baffles scholars today. Imagine a city divided into two parts, one on the mainland and another on a fortified island nearly a kilometer off the coast, connected by an elevated causeway. From there, merchant ships departed toward the Mediterranean, carrying wealth to the farthest corners of the known world. But the true treasure of Tyre was not in its ships. It was in its purple dye. Today, it may seem common, but at that time, purple extracted from small mollusks was more valuable than gold. It was a symbol of power, status, and royalty. To produce just 30 grams of dye, over 10,000 mollusks were needed. Now think about this. When Roman soldiers dressed Jesus in a purple robe to mock him, they may have unknowingly crowned him with the most expensive and exclusive color of antiquity. Tyre also played a crucial role in the construction of Solomon's temple. It was King Hiram of Tyre who provided the famous cedars of Lebanon, as well as the skilled artisans who participated in building one of the most splendid structures history has ever seen. These trees were so valuable, they were transported by sea on giant rafts capable of carrying hundreds of logs, a remarkable naval feat for that era. However, despite its strength, Tyre could not escape its prophesied fate. Nebuchadnezzar besieged it for 13 long years, but it was Alexander the Great who did the unthinkable. He used rubble from the mainland city to build a causeway to the island, almost a kilometer of landfill over the sea, thus fulfilling the prophecy that Tyre would be thrown into the water. Today, that island is no longer an island. It has become a peninsula, forever marked by one of the greatest feats of ancient military engineering. And now we come to Nineveh, the majestic capital of Assyria, a city so vast that, according to the book of Jonah, it took 3 days to walk through it. 3 days to cross the heart of one of the most feared and powerful empires in ancient history. But the most astonishing thing is not its size, but what happened there. A brutal, arrogant, and oppressive city that, upon hearing the prophetic word, fell into collective repentance. A miraculous event that echoed in heaven and was etched into eternity. The walls of Nineveh were so colossal that they still astonish archaeologists today, so wide that 3 chariots could ride side by side on top of them, so tall that they cast shadows so vast they blocked sunlight from reaching those who approached. Recent excavations have revealed surprising finds that confirm what ancient accounts had already hinted at centuries ago. But pay close attention. The next cities we are about to explore are even more astonishing. They contain secrets and details that will leave you in awe at the accuracy and depth of the biblical narrative. Alexandria, the city of light, where knowledge and faith converged. Imagine a city designed with such precision that its streets formed a perfect chessboard. Avenues so wide that dozens of chariots could ride side by side without issue. That was Alexandria, the dream of Alexander the Great brought to life. It is said that Alexander himself drew the city's layout with his own hands, using flowers to mark the lines on the ground. A symbolic gesture that nonetheless gave rise to one of the most iconic cities of antiquity. Nineveh was, without a doubt, a colossal city. The palace of King Sennacherib was discovered, with more than 80 rooms, all decorated with finely carved reliefs that depicted, in astonishing detail, the military conquests of the Assyrian Empire. But perhaps the most fascinating find was its library, one of the first organized collections of knowledge in human history, containing more than 22,000 clay tablets. These texts covered a wide range of topics, from laws and medicine to astronomical records. However, what few people know is that this city, famous for its cruelty and dominance, was also the setting for the most impactful collective conversion ever recorded in Scripture. When the prophet Jonah finally proclaimed his message in Nineveh, something unexpected happened. From the monarch on his throne to the humblest laborer, everyone repented. They dressed in sackcloth, covered themselves with ashes, and cried out fervently for divine mercy. Imagine an entire metropolis halting its routine, not because of war or famine, but in search of redemption. This massive act of contrition was so sincere that judgment on the city was delayed for more than 100 years. But just as the prophets had foretold, the appointed day came. In 612 BC, Nineveh was completely destroyed by a coalition of Babylonians and Medes. Traces of the devastation can still be seen today in a nearly 2-meter-thick layer of ash found at the site. The city that had sown terror in the ancient Middle East for centuries was reduced to ruins. It was the collapse of an empire and the exact fulfillment of a biblical prophecy. And finally, we arrive at Jerusalem, the city where the eternal touched the earthly, a place so sacred that it is revered by 3 of the world's major religions, so contested that over the centuries it has been conquered, destroyed, and rebuilt more than 40 times. Every stone in Jerusalem holds stories of faith, conflict, and hope. It is a stage of millennia-old promises and spiritual battles whose echoes still resonate today. But what astonishes archaeologists most about Jerusalem is not only what stands above the surface, but what remains hidden underground. The so-called City of David conceals ancient underground passages, including an ingenious hydraulic system that allowed its inhabitants to withstand long sieges without running out of drinking water. A masterpiece of engineering built more than 3,000 years ago. And, if that already impresses, Solomon's temple takes magnificence to another level. It is estimated that more than 86 tons of gold were used in its construction, the equivalent of billions of dollars at today's value, a splendor never equaled. The Second Temple, expanded by Herod, also defies all modern logic. Its foundations were built with stone blocks so colossal that some weigh more than 500 tons, more than a fully loaded Boeing 747. To this day, engineers and historians debate how they were cut, transported, and positioned with such precision in an era without modern technology. Jerusalem is unique, the only place on the planet considered sacred by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. For Jews, it is the mount where Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac and where the sacred temple stood. For Christians, it is the place of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. For Muslims, it is the site from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. This spiritual convergence makes Jerusalem a true point of contact between the heavenly and the human, a space where the divine is interwoven with history. And archaeological evidence only confirms what the scriptures tell. The tunnel that Hezekiah ordered to be dug to supply the city with water during the Assyrian siege, the pool of Siloam, where Jesus healed a man born blind. These are tangible structures lying beneath the streets of modern Jerusalem, intertwining faith and history in a deeply moving way. It was in this city where Jesus fulfilled ancient prophecies, was crucified, and rose on the third day. Roman chroniclers like Flavius Josephus documented these events with remarkable accuracy, reinforcing the historical validity of accounts that would transform the world forever. But what truly leaves scholars breathless is the Library of Alexandria, the Google of the ancient world. With more than 700,000 papyrus scrolls, this sanctuary of knowledge held virtually all accumulated wisdom: science, philosophy, astronomy, medicine, poetry. Nothing escaped its silent, wisdom-filled halls. And it was in this same intellectual setting where one of the most monumental events in the history of faith occurred: the translation of the Septuagint, the first version of the Old Testament translated from Hebrew into Greek. This version allowed the scriptures to spread throughout the Mediterranean world, making them accessible to both the Jews of the diaspora and the early Christians. It was a milestone that paved the way for the expansion of the biblical message across the Greco-Roman world. And how could we speak of Alexandria without mentioning its legendary lighthouse? The Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was an impressive feat of engineering. Standing 140 meters tall, the equivalent of a 40-story building, it projected light using polished mirrors that could be seen more than 50 kilometers away, guiding ships with technology that defied the logic of its time. It was much more than a nautical tool. It represented the power, innovation, and splendor of Alexandria. In the New Testament, Alexandria appears indirectly as the birthplace of Apollos, an eloquent preacher who played a key role in spreading the gospel. But what many don't know is that Alexandria hosted the largest Jewish community outside of Palestine. This cultural link was essential for the emerging Christianity, which needed to go beyond the Hebrew world to engage with Greco-Roman culture. Alexandria wasn't just a city, it was a beacon, both literally and symbolically, for humanity. A place where thought and faith walked hand in hand, shaping generations and influencing Western thought. Now let's move on to Babylon, the city that dared to challenge the heavens with technology far ahead of its time. The magnificence of this metropolis still amazes modern archaeologists and engineers. Can you imagine a city with walls up to 90 meters high, the height of a 30-story building, and so wide that chariot races were held on top? That was Babylon. Among its wonders stood the dazzling Ishtar Gate, now reconstructed in museums around the world, covered in blue-glazed bricks that shimmered like sapphires under the Mesopotamian sun. The Bible mentions Babylon from the days of the Tower of Babel, when humanity tried to reach the heavens and God confused their language. But it was during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II that Babylon reached its greatest glory, becoming one of the most majestic cities of the ancient world. He was the one who conquered Jerusalem in 586 BC, taking thousands of Jews into exile, one of the most painful and transformative episodes in biblical history. And then there were the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. According to tradition, Nebuchadnezzar had them built as a gift for his wife, who longed for the green mountains of her homeland. Imagine an artificial hill covered in lush vegetation, with elevated terraces and hydraulic systems so sophisticated they challenged the engineering knowledge of their time. During the Babylonian exile, the Jews faced the great challenge of preserving their faith far from home. It was during that time that the synagogue system was born, and many sacred texts were compiled and preserved. The faith that had once centered on the temple took root in the scriptures, a deep transformation that would later pave the way for the emergence of Christianity. But perhaps the most astonishing part was how Babylon's fall to the Persians in 539 BC happened exactly as prophesied. Cyrus the Great diverted the course of the Euphrates River and entered the city through unguarded gates, fulfilling with chilling precision the words foretold centuries earlier by the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah. If this message touched your heart, leave a like now as an act of faith, and may God pour abundant blessings over your life. You've just discovered a small glimpse of what makes these cities so extraordinary. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Get ready, because there's still much more history to uncover. See you soon.